Hello and welcome back to A Fall from Grace. As you just saw, we're going to be starting right after Lysander basically catches up with Cedric and Vincent, and he is looking to, I suppose, take back Cedric and take out Vincent, because that is his one and only obstacle. You know, it isn't his personality, it isn't the fact that he's crazy, basically. And yeah, as you can see, the mansion that belonged to Lysander's relatives is burning down. And that's where Cedric, Vincent, and the rest of the gang were going to try to do their little heist in order to basically just leave town and, you know, live pretty much good lives, I suppose. And yeah, things are not looking good for the duo, and we don't really know what happened to the rest of the I guess thieves is a good name. But, you know, the rest of their friends, we don't really know what happened to them. Here's still hoping that they all escaped. But are Cedric and Vincent going to be able to escape? I mean, because Vincent was kind of beaten by the people that Lysander hired in order to kidnap him, in order to be able to take Cedric for his own or whatever. You know, whatever's going on in his weird, screwy head. But yeah, they're in a really difficult spot. Also, this is the final update of A Fall from Grace, and it is kind of long, so it's probably going to end up being either one really long video or two videos. So yeah. Anyways, without further ado, let us begin the ending of A Fall from Grace. Before they knew it, Cedric and Victor were running. Where they were going didn't matter. They had to get away. They had to lose him. Cedric was leading the way. His feet flew past a white wooden gate nestled between some tall hedges and into the estate's huge garden. Their surroundings would have been pitch black had it not been for the snow's faint glowing light illuminating their way. There was no way out. He didn't have the courage to look back. He could feel the beast getting nearer with each passing second, his voice carried by the wind. It was a miracle that he hadn't caught up to them. The tension dripping all around was unbearable. All they could do was keep running and pray that they didn't hear a gunshot ring out. Give up. The lion only needed a split second to take aim. And then, in another split second, it would be all over. The path grew narrower, the hedges grew taller and closer. Statues hiding behind the dark foliage jumped out at them like sentinels with their weapons drawn. Moments later, the icy wind slapped them clean across the muzzle. They emerged into a different part of the garden. Rolling hills stretched into the horizon, with groups of trees standing watch here and there, guarding a temple or a soon-to-be frozen lake. The coyote could hear his partner's loud panting next to him. Their hands were glued together, clinging on to the single illusion of safety that they had left. Now wasn't the time to stop. He could see the lights of Hildford Town Center peeking out at them, hidden behind a forested area atop a steep hill. This way. Just a few seconds after making his new start, they came to a sudden halt, almost falling over in a deepened snow. The ground before them had been replaced by a ditch indicating the garden's perimeter, completely invisible up until that point. These were all the rage in modern landscape designs, giving the illusion that property stretched out indefinitely, enveloping each field and farm that had the audacity to fit into the view. They'd even been given a hideously annoying name Cedric couldn't stand. Fucking ha-has. What is it? What's funny? There was no time to explain what he meant to the fox. They had to jump, whether they liked it or not. The world briefly turned upside down, and it was then that they found the snow that had bestowed their second blessing, both illuminating their surroundings and softening their landing. Following a muffled thump, Cedric brushed it off of his clothes and picked himself haphazardly, ready to set off again. But Victor was still lying on the cold ground. V, are you all right? His voice was faint. I'm sorry. I don't know how much strength I have left in me. We must try to make it back to the town. We're nearly there. It's almost over. The coyote slipped an arm around his partner, pulling him up as best as he could. I'll try my best. I promise. Their boots sunk into the crunchy snow. Each step felt slower and heavier than the last. Some lonely houses on the town's outskirts were already coming into view and calling out to the two. Another thump echoed behind them, chilling Cedric to his core. There he was. He's getting closer. Cedric looked back for just a second, expecting the worst. But there was no sign of movement behind them. It felt too good to be true. That lion had a new trick up his sleeve, most likely. They had to keep going. Reaching Hildford would mean that they would be able to lose Lysander in the narrow streets or to take refuge in the crowded tavern. He'll be waiting for you. The woodland they'd caught a glimpse of earlier flickered into view and then disappeared just as quickly. The ground beneath their feet grew flat. They'd reached the road and could breathe a sigh of relief. Old crooked buildings became taller and more frequent until they flanked the cobbled street on either side, giving the two bandits respite from the icy wind. Their appearance was almost comical. Anyone running into them would have mistaken them for a pair of wandering, hapless spirits. Yet there was no soul to be seen anywhere, nor was there a single light in any of the windows in this shabbier corner of town. It felt like they'd entered a ghost city. They took a right turn, then a left turn, then another right. None of these lanes looked any different to the ones that they'd left behind. Surely they had to be out of the poorer neighborhood by now. A lamppost illuminated a side street up ahead, and from the light projected onto a wall they saw shadows of men with rifles running past. This still wasn't over. The guards were busy searching for them and the rest of the masquerade all over town. The two lovers darted into a narrow side street, only to find a dead Anne staring back at them. Shit. Cedric's frustration was growing. Damned old medieval towns and their confusing layouts. He could see Victor's leg were about to give in again. We'll find the closest public house and hide in there. There has to be one nearby. The fox nodded. Then we can. Just as he emerged from the narrow side street, there he was, before them with a flash of white. His pistol pointed straight at them. The flap of the black cape in the wind was all that could be heard. Any other sight or sound ceased to exist. That was until they heard it. Laughter. A horrid, stomach-churning cackle at having cornered his prey at long last. You think that you know these streets better than me, Cedric? All the coyote could do was glare back at him, wishing that he could peel his skin off with his bare hands. Lysander waved his weapon. Get back into that alley. Now. Cedric and Victor did as they were told. Quite the wild goose chase you've led me on. Lysander's eyes landed on the fox that he'd come to consider his mortal enemy. He was speaking softly, positively beaming from cheek to cheek. Victor. He gritted his teeth as the name escaped his lips. I've heard so much about you. He extended a glove hand towards the fox while pointing his weapon straight at Cedric's head. The message was clear, and Victor was forced to indulge him. The moment that they touched hands, Lysander grabbed the fox and pulled him inwards with such strength that he drew a blood-curdling yell of pain. Lie! Stop! Please! He's handsome, isn't he, Cedric? Lysander shoved his elbow into Victor, causing him to stumble to the ground. I want you on your knees, fox. If you beg hard enough, I might spare your life. What is it that you want from— Shut up. Do all those nights we spent together mean nothing to you? You could have had everything you wanted from me. There was no reason for you to leave. I would have let you even shag this one on the side. But alas, I misjudged how strong the vices and allure of the base-born faggots like him truly are. I shouldn't have let you out of my sight. That was my greatest mistake. His gaze settled on Victor. You played your cards well indeed, Fox. Taking my Cedric hostage at knife point, convincing me that he was dead, manipulating him into following you anywhere. But the game is over now. As the coyote caught a glimpse of Lysander's eyes, he found them shining with tears. These betrayed a vulnerability that he'd never seen in a lion. And yet, there was nothing left behind those eyes. How could I know, Lai? You never told me anything. He raised his voice with each word. This whole time you loved me and said nothing? There was no answer. Cedric's words vanished into the chilly night air. Lysander's weapon was still pointed straight at him. I know the fox has a pistol tucked away in one of his pockets. Take it from him." The coyote had no choice but to do as he was told. His brain was racing. What was Lysander's plan? He bent down and reached for the right pocket beneath Victor's white coat. The fox took a hold of his hand for a brief instant. He was guiding him towards a weapon. Tears began flowing down his cheeks uncontrollably. The hard, cold metal touched his hand, causing him to almost jump. Feeling like his mind and body no longer coexisted, Cedric saw himself stand up again, with his head held low, powerless to stop what was about to happen. "Good boy. Now shoot him." There they were. The words that he'd been dreading the most. Deep down, he'd know that it would all come to this. He could feel his stomach churning. "Please. Lysander, I beg of you." His hand was shaking, barely able to hold onto the weapon. "There must be some other way." His breathing was stilted, uneven. "Some agreement that we could come to." Lysander was staring straight into his soul. "Don't you worry. Once the fox is dead, everything will go back to how it used to be. I will take exceedingly good care of you." Cedric locked eyes with his lover. There knelt the fox who had shown him a glimpse of what living felt like. The fox he dreamt of sharing his home and his future with. No longer able to contain himself, he began to sob loudly. There was no point living without him. No point in waking up again without Victor at his side. He lifted his right arm and cocked Victor's pistol with a piercing click. Their old argument over whether killing was a necessary evil flashed before him, unprompted. How he'd vowed to never murder anyone if he could avoid it. What would past Cedric think of him now? What was he meant to do? Ever since he'd chosen to leave his home with Victor, life had been one decision after the next. He'd made his first real decision that distant evening on the rooftops. Up until then, his parents and Lysander had dragged him around, making all of his choices for him, whilst he hadn't cared enough to speak up for himself. Whenever a problem would arise, he would run. And what did that running ever do for you, said? It only delayed the inevitable, piled all of your life's problems up into an amorphous mass. The consequences of your running are here now, and you're going to have to face them once and for all. He had to choose quickly. His lover's life. Or his. Lysander pointed his pistol at Victor. "Hurry up, Cedric. Now's not the time for pondering. If you don't shoot him, I will." Victor gazed deep into his eyes. He understood the coyote's every thought. "I love you, Cedric." Cedric wiped his soaking muzzle with his left hand. He lifted his arm. Lysander lowered his in turn. "I love you too, Victor." The gunshot was deafening. It was so sudden, none of them had time to react. Just over a second later, the lion bent over, clutching his left arm with his hand and howling in pain. Urgh! There was a loud clang as his pistol hit the muddy cobblestones. "You bastard horse son! How could you?" Cedric ran towards Victor, pulling him up from the ground. "You think that you're the hero, do you? All that you've done is disappoint the people who love you the most. Your family, your friends. You've been given more chances than you were ever worth. And you've thrown them all away for him." In an instant, Lysander produced a shiny dagger from one of his belts. "If you can't live without each other, you might as well die together." He lifted it to the sky and lunged towards them. This time, Cedric's brain had enough time to react. He grabbed his own pistol from his right pocket. He fired straight at Lysander. The lion clutched his stomach with his free hand. With lightning speed, Cedric reloaded his weapon. Then he fired again. He hit Lysander in the left leg, sending him careening to the ground. The lion let go of the dagger, but due to his proximity, Cedric was unable to avoid it. He gritted his teeth as he felt the blade tear past his right leg. Ah! Shit! There was a loud thud as Lysander hit the snowy ground with his chin. An agonizing groan. Then silence. The world stood still for a brief moment. Cedric's mind began to process what he'd just done. He was gazing upon the lion's lifeless body sprawled out before them. He just shot somebody dead. After all this talk about being above this sort of thing, he'd pulled the trigger not once, but 3 times. He'd aimed straight for his former friend with nothing but the intent to end his life. Victor looked over at the mass of blood-stained black clothes. Is he... I don't know. Cedric felt like he was about to faint. His surroundings grew dim. Stay with me, darling. Everything is all right. You're all right. I'm all right. I killed him. And that was worse. He didn't regret it. You had no choice. He was going to murder us both. We're still alive thanks to you. With a little shake, Victor managed to snap the coyote out of his thoughts. Still, Cedric didn't speak another word for a long while. Come on, we need to get back to camp. It's our only option now. The coyote nodded. Victor put his arm around his lover's waist, and Cedric began to move, limping his way into the ice-cold night. The sound of heavy footsteps was encroaching from a distance. Soon the guards would find Lysander's body, but the 2 bandits still had a chance to get away in time if they moved fast enough. Yet unbeknownst to them, Lysander was still alive. Despite the agonizing pain, he'd managed to roll himself over so that he had a view of the 2 as they got further away. He wasn't going to let them go, not after tonight. With a grunt, he hunched over to pick up the loaded pistol that he dropped only a few minutes before. If he couldn't have Cedric, no one could. Slowly but surely he aimed for the coyote's head, using the ground to stabilize his arm. He could see it already, Cedric's brains being blown out, his lifeless body falling to the ground, the fox weeping inconsolably whilst the guards surrounded them. His fur stood on end as a wave of savage energy rushed through him. Hang you both. There was a loud crunch. Lysander watched in horror as the mangled remains of what had been his right hand stared back at him, helplessly crunched under a large foot. A shadowy figure bent over him. Lysander wanted to scream in pain and frustration, but the blood loss left him with the energy for neither. They picked up his weapon and shoved it against his temple. No. Please. A white hand clutched his chin, yanking his head upwards with enough force to break his neck. Who are you? The moonlight hit the stranger's face that very instant, allowing Lysander to discern the features of a threatening hyena whose fangs shone mere inches from his own muzzle. Less than a friend and more than an enemy when it concerns you. This must have been one of Cedric's bandits' friends. Listen, I have money. I don't care about your money. I have land. The hyena raised his voice. I don't give a fuck about your land. There is nothing, no amount of gold, no amount of land that you can offer me that will make up for what you've put the 2 of them through. After everything that they've done together, and no doubt what they'll go through after this, I'll be the damned one if I let their tale end in tragedy like so many before them. As soon as you're stripped of your confidence and your power, you're all the same, cowering, driveling fools. You deserve to come face to face with the consequences of your actions. And you deserve to die like a dog. The shadows of the guards were visible on the old stone walls, their cries filling the air. In all the commotion, the distant figures of Cedric and Victor had gone by quietly unnoticed. In the corner of his eye, Dion watched them fade into the night. His rage-filled snarls ceased. The cool mask of the bandit leader slipped on as Dion began his newest performance. Any personal feelings were cast aside. He was to play the role of death for his new audience of 1, and soon to be many. Any last words, lion? Those heavy footsteps were getting closer by the second. The group of 3 guards had just come into view at the end of the long lane. Lysander's vision was growing blurry. He gurgled a reply. Base-born thugs. However much you fight, none of you will ever be worthy of walking on the same ground as people like... A few people in the surrounding buildings who had heard the gunshots swung their shutters open, peeking out to see what all the commotion was about. The flicker of candlelight shone above Dion. The hyena stood up and slid his mask back on, using the faint light and his massive frame to intimidate the guards, who had just caught sight of him. It worked. They froze in their tracks, unable to discern who or what they were seeing, whether this was all real or just a hallucination. They hadn't even had time to lift their weapons and could now see Dion was pointing his own pistol straight at them. There was a great deal of shouting and confusion. Dion seized the moment to make his dramatic exit, raising his deep voice so that it would echo across the alley. Let it be known on this night that death hath come to this town, and I am his messenger. It seeketh not the innocent, meekly huddled beneath their covers. It covets the wicked, those that take pleasure in creating the misfortune of others. Should you dare act upon your vile urges, you shall meet this very fate. With a rapid and calculated movement, the hyena swung his right arm downwards and shot Lysander's lifeless corpse one last time. This was the last straw for the few brave souls still peeking out from the windows. The shutters slammed closed and all artificial light went out, plunging the alley into darkness. By the time that the first guard got his wits about him to fire at the spot that Dion had been, the brief flare of the muzzle lit the darkness to reveal nothing but the air above the villain's corpse. Neither Cedric nor Victor had said a word until they caught sight of the bandit camp. It had taken them forever. Everything looked so different in the snow. The sight of distant smoke, originating from the campfire and indicating that the others were safe, helped guide the pair like a makeshift lighthouse. It almost seemed too convenient. They shouldn't keep the fire going on a night like this. They're probably hoping that it'll help us back quicker. Victor replied with a skeptical grunt. It'll help the guards find them a lot quicker, too. Well, let's just be cautious upon arriving there, my darling. We don't want more trouble. Upon reaching the clearing, they could see Selwyn's silhouette next to the fire. It looked like he was roasting some meat as a late-night dinner for the group. Cedric breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily, Victor's suspicions had proven ill-founded. Hollis was there too, just a few feet away from the house cat, moving some stacks from the cart over to Dion's tent, replacing them with a number of boxes and cases from the other tents. It was clear that the camp was already in the process of being taken apart. The moment that he caught sight of Cedric and Victor, Selwyn dropped the ladle that he had been holding and bolted towards him, enveloping them in a warm hug. Then he turned back and called out, his voice echoing from one tent to the next. They're back! They're alive! He was shaking. Hollis, Blake, and lastly Ridley emerged from the tents, excitedly rushing over to greet them. Boys, are we glad to see you. Ced, Victor. Thank heavens. What's with the campfire? It's a good way of getting spotted at a night like this. I kept telling them to put it out, but they wouldn't fucking listen. Hollis raised his voice. It was clear that all of them that were still on edge after the evening's event and had already had this argument before Cedric and Victor had reached the camp. Do you think that I don't know that it's dangerous? I only did it for those of us who were still out there. He pointed at the two. And it worked, didn't it? You know that that's not the reason for Blake's argument. The factor alone isn't worth the risk of attracting all the guards in Hillsford. We're armed fucking bandits. We can defend ourselves. So what if they see us first? What if they ambush us? You thought about that? Shut it, lads. It's not worth it. The coyote's stern words snapped the others out of their argument. It was then that Hollis noticed Cedric's leg. Ced, you're wounded. Let me get you something to treat that. What happened? Blake's look betrayed a hint of guilt for not having taken notice of the state his companions were in until that moment. Despite the tense atmosphere, the coyote managed to smile. He appreciated his friend's concern. I must have tripped over something is all. You're alive, and you're safe. That's what matters most. Come on, let's get them both into their tents. Cedric and Victor were rushed into their lodgings and onto their soft, warm bed, which felt even softer and even warmer after their long trek in the snow. "How did you two make it out of there?" "Sel, they're tired." Ridley's low mood and short temper hadn't dimmed. "No, it's fine. It makes for a good story. Lysander had planned a proper fox hunt to corner me. They kidnapped damn every near fox in the building." Victor turned to look at his partner sitting next to him. "I'm damned if I ever accept an invite to a tea party again." "I don't know how you could even joke about it." "I'm almost accepted that everything had gone to shit until Cedric set the whole building ablaze and performed an absolutely mad impromptu rescue mission." "No fucking way." "That was you?" "It's not as glorious as he's making it out to sound. I got extremely lucky by receiving some help from old friends." "How did you boys get back safely? We noticed that the carriage was gone by the time that we stepped outside." "We got pretty lucky ourselves. The guards caught Ridley and Blake the second time that they made it into the treasury, and our Selwyn here broke them out." "Damn impressive work, Sel." The cat smiled and nervously fidgeted with his hands at the compliment. "Oh, it was nothing much. We wouldn't have needed rescuing if I hadn't been an overconfident idiot earlier on." "It wasn't your fault, Rid. We were both in over our heads." Blake held out his left hand for the bear to take, but Ridley crossed his arms out of frustration. "A proper professional could have been in and out of that room 20 times before being caught." Hollis's voice echoed from outside before he re-emerged with some clothes and bandages. "Despite everything, we managed to make off with enough loot to call this a successful job. It might be the bare minimum compared to what we would have gotten, but that's neither here nor there." Ridley was still frowning. "I wouldn't be so fast to cheer after what happened this evening, or even boast about it." "I wasn't boasting. This evening should humble each and every bandit here. Setting aside the fact that none of us looked into who that mansion belonged to, which is bad enough, I don't see how we can be rejoicing when one of us is still missing, and not just anyone." Hollis sighed. "You're right, Rid. I was trying to be optimistic." "You two haven't seen Dion, have you?" Cedric shook his head. In all the chaos of the evening, he hadn't realized the hyena wasn't there. "I was rushing around like mad, looking for him and for you two everywhere. After a while, the fire had grown too dangerous and I had to give up and head back to the carriage." "You don't think that he's—" "Don't be daft. I know that hyena as my own brother. He wouldn't let himself get captured so easily." Before Hollis could elaborate further, there was a cough behind them. "Indeed, I wouldn't." They all turned to see a battered and exhausted but ever-confident Dion standing at the tent's entrance. He made his way inside, reaching Hollis in enough silence that the bandits could have heard a pin drop. In the blink of an eye, he'd pushed him in for a warm hug, which the tiger reciprocated. Though given Dion's massive build, Hollis's arms couldn't reach all the way around his back as much as he tried. "Dion, you're covered in blood." "Think no more of it, dear Hollis. I got into a scuffle with a few guards on my way back. Bashed a few heads in. Nothing out of the ordinary. I really don't know what we would do without you." Finally, the group could breathe a sigh of relief. It was all over. They were all safe. Yet, when Cedric watched the leader of their little troop, he couldn't help but feel something was off. After having spent months with the man, he'd learned to pick up on the almost imperceptible details of everything he did. So why, Cedric wondered, was Dion lying? Each of them had a lot to tell about their adventures, but once dinner was ready, the fatigue that they were feeling fully reached its head, and the majority of supper was spent saying little or nothing. There had been discussions on whether to stay the night or depart immediately, with the agreement being that the town's guards clearly had much more pressing things to worry about in town than outside of it. Nevertheless, when all was said and done in the morning, everyone should be splitting off for a little while until the heat on them lessened. Then, if all went well, in a month or two, the others would meet up again in a seaside town. Washing the dishes was officially postponed to the following morning. Each bandit was more than eager to retire to their tent and get some well-earned shut-eye. Cedric, Victor, and Dion were the last left, still sitting around the fire. Before the couple could leave, Dion raised his hand, demanding their attention. My friends, I have a last few words to say that might be of interest to you. He turned to look at Cedric and Victor, smiling faintly. Dion had never looked so shattered. Cedric had no clue as to what he was going to hear next. We're all well aware that things tonight didn't exactly go as planned. He nodded. There was no arguing. Each of them was lucky to have made it out of that manor alive. Now he felt like he knew what was coming. Both him and Victor still had a good amount of their loot in their pockets when they got back to camp, with the exception of what had fallen out during their escape across the gardens and snowy fields. But surely it wasn't enough to pay off the Fox's debt towards the bandit leader, especially since the others hadn't managed to take as much as they had been hoping. And that meant at least a few more months of living with the group once they had met up again. Not that Cedric minded, despite being anxious to make a new start in life with Victor, postponing their heartfelt goodbyes with the bandits he'd come to regard as his closest friends didn't hurt in the slightest. As of tonight, I consider Victor's debt to me fully repaid. Neither of you are under any obligation to remain with us any longer. Come morning, you'll be handed your share of tonight's profits, which should be more than enough to cover any expenses for the next 6 months or so. No way the head just heard that right. Did we really make that much money? Dion, you're taking the piss, aren't you? Dion let out a frustrated grunt. Quiet, you fools, unless you actually want me to change my mind about this. I am telling you because I trust you and because I respect you, and not least because I want what's best for you. It was coming true. They'd finally reached the next turning point in their lives. The future that they dreamt of since the first night spent together in their hometown had never been so close. All of my previous offers still stand, mainly the one that I made to you earlier, Cedric. I suppose my only request is, don't go forgetting all about us now, whatever you do. Good night, lads. And with that, the hyena disappeared behind his tent's soft fabric, leaving Cedric and Victor by themselves. Cedric had wanted to say more, but he could tell that despite how much he loved attention, Dion needed some time alone. The warmth of the glowing embers felt like a well-needed embrace to both animals. Neither of them wanted to get up from where they were huddled in the slightest. My darling. Before Victor could complete his sentence, he'd been locked into a passionate embrace. Despite feeling emotions welling up inside of him, Cedric almost didn't have any tears left to shed after earlier. He rested his head on his partner's chest, listening to the long, reassuring breaths resonating within. Victor put one hand on the coyote's head and gently stroked his messy hair. There, curled up in front of him, lay his own knight in shining armor. Thank you for saving me. Cedric had his eyes closed and muttered a faint reply. I can't believe I did it. I actually shot him. Me of all people. He was still mulling it over. It didn't feel real yet. It still felt like a bad dream that he had just woken up from. You were phenomenal. The fox took a moment to gather his thoughts. I've never seen anyone look more furious than that lion. He was genuinely terrifying. Cedric nodded. There was nothing of that Alessandra that I used to know left in him. Absolutely nothing. Now, he's out of your life for good. Not to mention out of anyone's life, or life in general. His portrayal of death was so convincing that he actually died. You twat. You're already joking about him, aren't you? The fox chuckled. As is my God-given right. He tightened his grip, returning to a more serious tone. I know it can't be easy. Whatever thoughts crossed your mind, you can tell me about it. What you did tonight was heroic, although it won't feel that way to you, but believe me, it was. Thank you, V. It means a lot to have your support. Always. Cedric could finally feel the evening stress and anxiety subsiding. If I think of something that I want to talk about with you, I won't hesitate. They both closed their eyes, letting tiredness gently wash over them, wishing that they could say more, but failing to think of anything to add. Let's get some sleep now. I think we both deserve it. Before they knew it, Morning had rolled around and each of them had packed their belongings and travel essentials upon finishing their breakfast. The sun shone bright, the sky was clear, and most of the snow from the night before had already melted, replaced by a great deal of thick mud and ice. Now came the part Cedric and Victor least looked forward to, having to say their goodbyes to the others. Victor could say that it wasn't his first time doing so at least, but Cedric could already feel a growing pit in his stomach. This wasn't going to be easy. I kind of feel like we should speak to Dion. Or are we going to get locked onto only speaking with one person? Because I would like to speak with him and him. They were my favorites. But Dion, I kind of feel like you have to speak with more because he's the one that did the deed. Whilst he was waiting for Victor to finish packing, Cedric stepped into the bandit leader's tent one last time. Good morning, Cedric, my lad. How did you sleep? Like a log. It's a miracle that I woke up at all. Are you excited about setting off? Cedric nodded, replying with a yawn. Though I'm still rather sleepy at the moment. Dion, who had been scribbling on some pieces of parchment, now turned around to face the coyote with a feathered pen in his hand. I thought you might like to know how much we made yesterday, before I hand you yours and Victor's shares. Oh, yes please. I'm very curious. And again, I'm sorry that Vi and I lost part of our money on our way home. It's because you needn't excuse yourself. I know that Lysander fellow was after you both. There was a reason that he had told the hyena about what had happened after their escape from the manor. Cedric knew that Dion would understand what he and Victor had been through. Though he couldn't help thinking that there was something about all of this that didn't add up. It was most likely some less relevant detail that he'd forgotten to add or ask about. He turned his attention back to the hyena, who had picked up the topmost piece of parchment from his desk. Now, not everything that we've obtained is cash, so I've had to make a bit of an estimate. I'm sure you two will be able to pawn off the other valuables at an even higher price. That being said, yesterday evening we obtained a grand total of £200, 4 shillings and 6 pence. Cedric's eyes widened, which means that you and Victor will be sharing around £57 between you. Not bad, all things considered. I was expecting a lot less, to be honest. I wouldn't have felt safe letting you two head off into the world had it been less. The current sum is well over the cost of a modest home, and the remainder of it should be so that you can stay afloat for a good few months. To the rear of the desk were some fat-looking sacks, one for each of the bandits. Dion grabbed one and handed it to the coyote. Stuff this into your belongings, and make sure you hand Victor his own. Of course. How can I even thank you? Dion grinned. A poem, perhaps. He placed a hand on the coyote's shoulder affectionately. We're going to be heading southward tonight. Hollis and I were thinking of setting up camp close to the seaside town for the next few months. Should you need us for any reason, I have a great many acquaintances scattered across the country. And if that method fails, you can always rely on any town's local gossip. It's not every day people start running into a gang of masked bandits such as ours. Very true, and you all know what direction Vi and I are headed in, so if you ever venture eastward, don't hesitate to call on us. Certainly, dear boy. Now to the road ahead of you. Au revoir and Godspeed. Cedric took off his hat to perform an elegant bow for the hyena. After this conversation, he was certain that this wasn't the last time that they'd cross paths. I'll bring you news of any new plays that I stumble upon, good or bad, and I eagerly await your reviews. That's my boy. Till we meet again, Dion. Fare thee well, gallant Cedric. Just as he stepped out of the tent, Cedric finally figured out what had been bothering him before. The detail that wasn't adding up. He'd never actually told Dion it was Lysander who chased them. Once they'd both finished saying their goodbyes, Victor and Cedric met up at the edge of the camp. The rest of the masquerade had offered to see them off together, or even to walk with them for a bit until they reached the path, but the couple had both refused, preferring to keep things feeling as normal as possible. This wasn't going to be a goodbye forever, as much as it may have felt like that in the moment. This was a parting with the knowledge that one day They'd see each other again. It was a great deal more comforting to think of the old bandit camp as something that they could return to, a home that they would always be there, waiting for them. Despite that somewhat somber tone the morning had taken, Victor was in good spirits and unable to contain an excited smile. The time has come. He offered Cedric his right hand, which the coyote took without hesitating. Lead the way, love. They made their way to the path that crossed the forest, in silence, letting the sounds of nature fill the air around them. The bare branches of the forest trees were swaying in the breeze, sounding like waves upon a windy beach. The rolling hills had an unusually crisp look to them, resembling the illustrations scattered across the book of chivalric tales Cedric had worn out as a child. As they neared Hilford's walls, they noticed a distinct lack of any guards skulking around. Cedric couldn't help wondering where on earth they'd been sent to, though he was wary about being foolishly optimistic. Victor had been their main target just a half-day earlier. There was no chance Lysander's death would put a stop to their hunt. If anything, it should have made things worse. The fox, however, seemed unbothered by these thoughts. Those guards would only do as much as they were paid to do, he explained. Those 5 pounds Selwyn had told him about only covered the night of the ball. And considering their actions had resulted in the manor going up in flames and their patron dead in a dark alley, not to mention each and every criminal managing their escape, he had a hunch that they might not want anything more to do with Hillsford for the next year or so. Surely they'd be glad to leave any further patrolling up to the local sentries. Still, it was better not to take any chances. Wrapping up some thick canvases around their necks and muzzles, they snuck past the guards, blending in with the crowd of people out and about for market day. Soon they walked past the steep uphill road that led to the old church, and there, nailed to a wooden board, a printed notice caught the coyote's eye. Hang on a sec. What is it? I thought I saw... Sure enough, there was Lysander's name in bold letters, along with the time and date of his funeral, which was to be held in the old church outside of Hidingstone Town in a day's time. Damn, they haven't wasted a moment. Victor leaned in to observe the notice skeptically. How on earth do you suppose his parents got news of this so fast? Weren't they supposed to be in Scotland? I have no idea. Perhaps they were also staying in town or not too far from here? Either way, talk of an embarrassing affair to deal with. They probably want to get it over and done with before people start prying into it. Well, good riddance. I wonder what nonsense they'll spew to cover up how he actually died, and what he was supposedly doing at that blasted masquerade ball. Why don't we find out? Those words had escaped Cedric's mouth before his brain could stop them. You mean to attend the bastard's funeral? He nodded. This was an irrational decision, but deep down he knew that there was no better way to finally close a long and tormented chapter of his life that had begun when he first met the lion. Would it make you feel better? I think so. Victor spent a minute pondering the matter, then he turned heel and began to climb the hill's steep path. Hey, V, where are you going? The fox turned back, beckoning Cedric over. There is a small inn hidden away in a side street near the church. The guards never check that place. We can take up lodging there for the night, then take a coach to Hidingstone tomorrow morning. Are you sure about this? It sounds risky, plus I don't want us to be wasting our money already. Taking a coach there and back isn't going to be cheap. Victor replied with a wink. My dear boy, we are still gentlemen of the highway, are we not? He patted the pockets that he was keeping his weapons hidden in. Whatever we spend, we can earn back. Cedric shook his head and playfully crossed his arms. Fine. You've talked me into it. Once they reached the top of the hill, the sweaty couple sat in a secluded, shady spot on the old stone wall that surrounded the church and its graveyard. They untied the bundles they'd been carrying in their sacks and shared the lunch Hollis had packed for them. 2 thick chunks of old cheese, a couple strips of dried meat, and some fruit might not have been fit for a king, but it was just what either of them needed for a day like this. The graveyard stretching out before them was quiet and peaceful. Every 5 minutes or so, a solitary figure would wander in or out of the old church, and Cedric would eye them up and down with some curiosity while he chewed on his meat. Do you remember our first meal together? The day that we began our journey? Of course I do. I recall you were narrating some of your adventures, and I was listening intently." The fox chuckled, waving off his remark. "Now that you're just as good of a bandit as I am, you might find my old adventures laughable." "Nonsense. They sounded like magical dream tales. I couldn't believe someone had actually lived through them." "You were so smitten with me. You hung on my every word." "I was madly in love with you. Thank you very much." "It was very cute." "Tell me another story, V. I'd love to listen." Victor hesitated for just an instant. "Of course. I have one that you might like. Remember how I used to resort to burglaries when nothing else worked? There was this one time that I'd set an eye on a posh little house absolutely stuffed with jewelry and antiques. I hung around closely for a few days to figure out how and when was best to sneak in, and that's when I learned about their serving maid. I think her name was Susan. They treated her like filth. I don't know what otherworldly strength she possessed, but she lived through each insult, each beating, and each caning those beasts would dish out. I began speaking to her, posing as a local guard. This was after my first time spent with Dion and the others. I recall Ridley had gotten his paws on a uniform and gifted it to me since it fit me perfectly. The next evening, I snuck my way in and took as much as I could. My sack was almost bursting. Made for all those previous burglaries gone wrong. The ones that I skillfully chose to not tell you about. Anyway, I tried my luck and went back there the day after, still donning the red uniform. Once she was on her way out, I handed Susan a portion of the loot and heavily suggested that she should seek employment elsewhere. And then you say that you're not a gentleman. I'm not, and I wasn't looking for praise or gratitude or anything of the sort. I just didn't want someone else to get into trouble for something that I'd done. Not again. And you know what the maddest thing was? She said that she didn't even want the money. Amazes me to this day. The cool breeze blew over them, caressing Cedric's hair. Victor was lost in thought and sat quietly beside him, observing the mossy gravestone that dotted the field in front of them. You know, Dad used to say people's kindness could be measured by how beautiful the flowers growing on their graves are in spring. No matter how much he wanted to, Cedric couldn't bring himself to reply. The previous day's events still felt too uncomfortably close for him to be thinking about life and death. He could still picture the fury in Lysander's eyes as he'd thrown himself at them both. Absolute hogwash. But it's a nice thought. He desperately wanted to believe that he could save the line somehow, spare them the journey into madness, of which he was a catalyst. Deep down, he still felt the empathy that had drawn them together in the first place, when neither of them had anyone else left to rely on. Must have heard it in some old folk song he knew. Cedric took hold of the fox's gloved hand. V, can you tell me everything will be all right? Victor wound his leg around his partner's. A number of people were now gathered outside the church door, chatting amongst themselves and taking no notice of the couple hidden in the shade. Of course, my darling. Everything will work out. Everything has worked out. You did all you could. No more, no less. And to me, you are a hero. The church bells rang out. With a bright and cheerful din, their notes were cascading downwards in a rapid but neatly calculated succession. Their pealing had the warmth of a friendly embrace. This was the couple's cue to pack up any leftovers and get going. Come on, let's go over and look for that inn now. The building in question was named the Red Lion Inn and was tucked away at the end of a winding and deserted medieval alley. Cedric couldn't help himself from making a joke about the oddly ill-timed name, saying that they'd better be careful in case it brought them bad luck. And sure enough, as the two bandits neared the tiny entrance, Victor hesitated. An old wanted sign displayed him in his bird-like mask was hanging there waiting for him, nailed to a wooden pillar. It was identical to those that Cedric had scattered around their hometown months earlier. On second thought, it, might be a tad risky to take up lodgings in Hillsford after all. Aye, not unless we magically managed to disguise you as a wolf or something. They'd be wary of letting potential bandits in after last night, especially foxes. Victor stood still for a while, with a hand on his chin, pondering the best course of action. "Would you be up for a couple hours of walk, my dear?" I wish you'd stop treating me like a princess. Of course I'd be up for that." "Oh, really? I recall just the other day you were complaining about a lump in your side of the bed, Your Highness." This was followed by the fox playfully scooping him up and tackling him with both arms. "I'm going to have your head on a pike one of these days." Victor loosened his grip, holding onto the coyote's hands. "I was thinking that we could head to Diurnham. It would have been our next stop anyway, since it's to the east of this place. There is a pub a few miles from the town, which is well known to most highwaymen. We'll be safe from prying eyes there." "That sounds like a plan." The sun had set a few hours before the two bandits finally reached their destination. Right from its shabby outward appearance, it was clear that the Bishop's Arms public house was no place for respectable folk. And the interior was no different. The ceiling's wooden beams hung low, with some scattered oil lamps refilling a series of small rooms and enclosed areas across the ground floor, mirroring what an architectural and historical mess the old building was. The sight and smell of the wafting smoke pervaded every passage and dark corner. What's more, a couple of uneven, slanted steps would appear almost at random when walking from one space to the next, as if they had been placed around for the sole purpose of tripping patrons up. Cedric was amazed at how Victor managed to navigate this space so well. Having reached the main corridor, a gruff and muscular otter stepped up to them, loudly placing his arms on the wooden surface without saying a word. "Any rooms for two?" "You'd be expecting a meal too, won't you?" "If you'd be so kind." Both bandits shared an amused look. The quality of service here was something to be witnessed. The otter grunted, picking up a large key and tossing it in their direction. "Room number 8. It's upstairs." Then he recognized the fox and his face lit up with a spark. "I haven't seen you in a while. Still alive?" "Barely." The deadpan reply was followed by a cavernous laugh. "Sit yourself down, and I'll fetch you some stew. What drinks will you be starting with?" 2 pints of Huffcap, please." "Excellent." The innkeeper addressed Victor as he filled up their mugs. "Who's this one, my love? Your boyfriend?" The fox smiled. "The name's Cedric." "You have good taste. There you are." "Cheers." The couple picked up their drinks and walked over to the closest empty room. Now Cedric was even more self-conscious about every step that he took, since stripping up and landing face first onto the ground wasn't on his list of priorities for the evening. "I know this isn't the best moment to say it, but that otter is exceedingly handsome." The fox chuckled. "Who, old Nate? I've heard many a bawdy tale about him." After resting their sacks on the wooden bench close to the window, they sat down. Victor raised his pint. Nastrovi, or whatever Dion might say. Slante. Just as they were taking their first sip, a colorful, well-dressed parrot appeared at the doorway, catching himself on the wooden beams after tripping over the step Cedric had carefully avoided moments before. I'm sorry, I thought it was empty." His face froze once he got a good look at the coyote. Then he raised his hands dramatically and pointed straight at him. "Cedric Doral? Is that you?" Now Cedric connected the dots. He knew this person. "Fuck's sake, would you mind not yelling my name out of the entire tavern?" "Drat, I'm sorry. Well, I never. Fancy finding you here." Victor's right hand eased away from his dagger upon realizing that they weren't a threat. He looked over at his partner with a confused expression. "Who is this?" "V, this is Amos Weld. His parents and mine were very close friends. He even traveled to Scotland with me when we turned 19, didn't you, Ced?" Amos and Victor exchanged a brief handshake. "Well, any friend of Cedric's is a friend of mine. Come sit down with us, lad." "My dear fellow, don't mind if I do." The parrot made himself comfortable next to Victor. "This here is my cousin Vincent. The two of us have become rather close during the last few months." Amos gave the fox a second handshake, much longer than the first. "Ah, splendid, splendid. Now do tell, Cedric, what on earth are you doing in this wretched little place?" "I could ask you the same question." "Oh, Long story short, I was dragged here by some friends of mine. Should have said no, really. But you know, pub crawl and all that. Lowbrow, commoner sort of thing. What sort of place is this anyway? I swear the people here look like, you know... He leaned in to whisper in Cedric's ear. Criminals. This was when the coyote became aware of just how vast the chasm between the two of them had grown since they'd last spent time together. This man had kept on living his simple, sheltered life for the past few years, to the point that he was completely out of his element when taken out of a ballroom or a tea house. Cedric couldn't help but feel a little sorry for him. Amos clearly had a good heart, despite everything. But never mind me. How about you? How's life been treating you? You still a confirmed bachelor at heart? I can't say that I am. The parrot's eyes lit up. Who's a lucky girl? The coyote sported a sad smile. It was tiring to never be able to do more than merely hint at a subject. A childhood friend. Old Cedric, soon to be the man of the house. You must introduce me to her, and you must join me on one of my hunting trips too. Amos was the sort of person that didn't really have any interests beyond the simple pastimes of the upper classes. Cedric couldn't avoid thinking how lucky he had been to finally befriend people that he had a lot more in common with after so many years. It was a grim thought that the people that he called his friends in the past either had no interest of their own or were only fun to talk to after a few pints. Say, have you heard what happened in Hildford last night? I couldn't believe it when I read the paper. You mean about the masquerade ball? Yes, a gang of bandits broke in, ransacked and burnt the place to the ground. My word, this has become a dangerous country indeed. Heard that there were at least 10 of them. Worst of all. The parrot lowered his voice. Rumor has it that there are a group of sodomites who all sleep with each other. Oh really, Amos? You expect us to believe in such fiddle-faddle? Amos placed a hand on his chest melodramatically. I don't expect you to believe anything. It's just a rumor. I didn't even know what that word meant until recently. Dinner is served, lads. Behind him, the innkeeper had appeared just a moment before with a pair of large bowls in his hands, filled to the brim with a steamy hot stew. He'd waited to make himself known, attempting to pick up on what was being discussed. And who's this third one? Am I gonna have to fetch something for you two? Amos waved both of his hands defensively, clearly unsettled by the otter's build and demeanor. Oh, no. I was just going to go look for my, He was off before that he even thought of how to finish that sentence. And they say us queers are the spineless ones. No, answer me one thing, boys. Were you involved in that masquerade ball heist we've heard so much talk of? Victor grinned. I have no idea what you're talking about, Nate. The two woke up early the following morning, shared a modest breakfast, paid the innkeeper, and stepped out into the frosty landscape to wait for the first coach to Hidingstone. 20 minutes later, the sound of the distant horn reached their ears, soon followed by the sight of a large black carriage heading their way. The journey, once they'd paid the coachman and fitted their belongings on board with those of the other passengers, was fairly swift. Victor, who wasn't at all used to riding a horse, much less a carriage, didn't spare himself from lamenting the quality of English roads and of modern drivers. Soon they were greeted by the sight of a familiar old roads that they had explored and gotten to know well during the summer, who accompanied them into the small town with its cobbled streets. The coachman blew his horn and loudly announced their current stop. Cedric and Victor climbed off and tied their sacks behind their backs with some sturdy rope. Next began the last leg of their journey out of town and towards the church nestled deep amongst the steep hills Lysander's parents would visit every Sunday. As the old building's spires slowly revealed themselves from behind the thick tree trunks, a bout of anxiety crept up on Cedric. He could already see a small crowd lingering outside, waiting for the ceremony to begin. He signaled to the fox to stop. Victor did as he was told and waited while his partner changed into his old green outfit behind a wide birch tree. Cedric had already made a point to shave his mustache and trim his hair before they left the bishop's arms, and once he reappeared, it was as if the lad the fox had run into almost half a year ago had been summoned back from magic. You might soon be stealing Riley's title as Master of Disguise, my dear. Cedric smiled, but his mood had only tanked further at the thought of actually entering the old church. His parents are gonna be there, as well as a bunch of other people that I know. You don't have to talk to anybody. The coyote let out a long sigh. I know. And that's where I'm gonna leave it for today. So, not we. Lysandra is finally dealt with, but unfortunately, I kind of wish that that whole scene section thing would have been a little longer, but I do kind of feel like because it was a continuation of what happened in the previous build, which is he shows up at the ball and he basically tells Cedric that he's gonna like take him back, and he kidnaps Victor and all that. That it did make sense for it to be this long because it literally is just continuing from what happened. But again, for some reason, I did wish that it would just have dragged on a little bit more. Like maybe Victor got away, but Cedric was kidnapped, and then the whole masquerade had to go and rescue Cedric, and then deal with him. But I suppose that this is also a nice ending because it also it gives Cedric like this whole little closure thing where, like, well, I mean, after killing him, he's gonna have this whole sort of like remorse thing, and we know that like obviously he didn't actually deal the finishing blow, but right now Cedric is not feeling too well about having essentially murdered somebody, and he's gonna have to get over that. But yeah. Also, good for Dion basically watching out for these two because, I mean, it kind of shows that he was that he is a good leader. That regardless of the fact that everything is burning down around them, he knows what's at stake right now because he knows that the person that is doing this is Lysander. And whether he knew it from the start or whether he realized it like till the end, like, oh, this mansion belongs to this family, I better go check on Cedric and Victor. And then he finds out like, oh, they're being chased by this guy. And yeah, like, good for Dion for being a good leader. And well, like I said, Cedric will have to overcome this whole thing of where he thought that he killed somebody because, I mean, it's like Victor said, if he didn't kill him, Victor would have died. And who knows what would have happened to Cedric. They would have been in a very, very, very unhappy quote-unquote relationship because, I mean, it wouldn't even be a relationship. He would be forcing Cedric to be with him. It would be a full-on toxic relationship, if it could even be called that. And, well, yeah, Lysander was just cuckoo crazy. He was an obsessed man with just, oh my god, delusions and stuff. I mean, literally, who goes out of their way to create a full costume that is basically going to be like a copy of the guy who you're trying to prove that you're better of? And like, to try to win the affection or whatever of this guy, this other guy? Like, that's not how you do it. But anyways, he's dealt with, so yeah. Now they are going to go on their separate ways, and hopefully the future for them is going to look better. But yeah. Anywho, so what are your thoughts so far? Did you like how the story is, coming to a close so far? Write it down in the comments, and thank you all for watching / listening. If you would like to play A Fall from Grace yourself, or play any of the other upcoming any of their new upcoming visual novels, which I believe one of them is called, oh, I forgot what it's called. Dawn Riders, something like that? Which is set in a more modern era, or actually read their sort of spin-off of this visual novel, which actually tells stories about the masquerade thieves, then you can do so by going down to the link in the description, which will have a direct link for the itch.io page where you can download and play the game yourself. If you would like to support their Patreon and support their future upcoming games, well, visual novels or stories, consider joining their Patreon, which gives you earlier access to builds of their upcoming visual novels and works in progress and all that other jazz. If you would like to support the channel, consider becoming a channel member, which gives you earlier access to these videos as they're being scheduled. And I just saw, and right now, this is going to be going up on the 5th, and the people who are channel members are going to be able to see it like immediately, basically, as soon as it goes up. But the people in, normal people, public, are not going to be able to see it until the end of April because there's already other stuff scheduled ahead of it. So, there you go. Anywho, so if you can't do that, there is Ko-fi. Any form of support is appreciated. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, whatever. And I also have a throne, so yeah. Anyway, so I guess that's it for now, and I will see you in the finale of A Fall from Grace.